support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Never believe fully in anybody else's BS. I don't care if it's Roger Nish, the Pope, L. Ron Hubbard, Al Gore, George Bush, or I don't care who it is. Don't swallow all their belief system totally. Don't accept all of their bullshit, all their BS. The second rule is like unto the first. Don't believe totally in your own BS. Which means that, as Bucky Fuller said, the universe consists of non-simultaneously apprehended events. Non-simultaneously. The universe consists of non-simultaneously apprehended events, which means any belief system or reality tunnel you've got right now is going to have to be revised and updated as you continue to apprehend new events later in time, not simultaneously. This is the natural functioning of the human brain. It's the way children's brains perform before they're wrecked by the school system. It's the way the minds of all great scientists and artists work. But once you have a belief system, everything that comes in either gets ignored if it doesn't fit the belief system, or it gets distorted enough so that it can fit into the belief system. You got to be continually revising your map of the world.
Now, you got that Asperger this time, didn't you?
I did.
Non-simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway,
events. Yeah.
we have to be really constantly on a vigil to
Absolutely.
take that information in from the late, great Robert Anton Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Down South Anomalies on the astounding Untold Radio Network. My name's Jay Katz.
And I'm Asperger.
And today we have the astounding, the profound, the incredibly innovative Frankie Louise. She'll be discussing AI, and we've entitled the episode Spooky Action in the Uncanny Valley.
That's right.
Now, before we
You'll
start...
have to explain all that.
I will have to explain all that.
Right.
But before we start, we must remind everyone out there that we are broadcasting on stolen land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We want to absolutely show our respect and appreciation to elders past, present, and emerging. Now, tonight's episode, we are really going down the rabbit hole here.
And what a rabbit hole.
And let me introduce the beautiful Frankie. Frankie Louise spends some time in LA, sometimes in Sydney. We don't know whether she's a natural-born Australian or whether she's actually an embedded American out of that incredible art scene that is Los Angeles. She is an experimental creative director currently exploring the augmentation of the human and its impact on art, philosophy, and psychology.
That's right.
She's also an amazing film director.
She is.
She's an incredible artist,
She
and I believe
is.
from day one she has been an experimentalist.
Yes.
That's where my career started.
Well, that's where we met her, isn't it? In our experiment.
In the
That's where
experiment.
we found her.
As a co-founder of LA-based Other with 2 R's, a non-human sentient research lab. Did you get that? Non-human sentient research lab.
Other
Frankie
with 2 R's.
is committed to projects that awaken the experience of being outside the program and embracing novelty. Now, we made a statement 69 episodes ago that there's very few things you can predict as a human being. Change, which is really novelty, is the only thing that this planet has ever accepted as a future that can be predicted.
That's
so
right.
she is right on the money. In 2023, Other with the 2 R's created and staged a live algorithmic performance called The Last Human.
That's right.
And you know the weirdest thing? I was the last actor in The Last Human. So that means I was cancelled out twice. An innovative crucible where man and machine collaborate on stage, inviting you to consider our current existential predicament as human beings. As we embrace the rise of artificial intelligence and the ascent of technology, conscious creators are our best chaperones into the unknown.
Yeah.
That is an incredible sentence.
I'm scared.
Because I've always believed that the miscreants are the ones that will carry us forward.
Absolutely.
And it always is those realms of the unknown. And how much in this reality we live in on a day-to-day level are we ever going to fully comprehend? Frankie Louise, thank you for joining us on Down South Anomalies.
It's so cool to be here with you guys. I love this
Ooh,
conversation.
there's LA right
Excited.
there.
Yeah, there's LA in its
Yeah.
Did it sneak
absolute
in?
and ultimate beauty
Yeah,
and
yeah.
expression.
Yeah.
And I've always felt that way about Frankie. Now, just before we begin, Frankie, excuse both of us, but it has taken nearly 2, maybe 3 years for an incredible trailer to come out from an incredible team of brothers, the Cameron brothers,
Yeah.
who have done a film that harks back to the notion of lost futures, hauntology,
Yeah.
and the way the world is going now.
Yeah.
So before we start with the program, the interview, Frankie, we need to play their trailer.
Yeah.
Oh, I love
And
that.
It's taken this long for a trailer to come out. They were out at the Sydney Film Festival last year in June. Is that correct? Yeah.
And we did the after party.
We did the after party, and then we did an interview on Untold Radio about their movie and stuff. And it's taken them this long to get the film's been finished for ages, but to get this trailer, it was shot during the lockdown period. But
I think you'll enjoy this, Frankie. And
it's an amazing.
I was just completely astounded by the voiceover. This is one contrivance that's truly worked and evoked all those haunted feelings that we had in the 70s. Like films like The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, and way beyond that. So I think now
Rosemary's Babies was 68.
Yeah, but this is streaming now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Let's do
go
it.
There.
On Halloween night, 1977, America gathered around for a live TV event that shocked a nation. What happened was real. What you are about to see is the recently discovered master tape of what went to air that night.
If Mr.
Ladies and gentlemen, now, here's Mr. Midnight, Jack
Late Night with the Devil.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's an amazing film.
It's astounding and way more complex than what that trailer gives
Absolutely.
off. But does it hark back to an extraordinary time? And I can remember going to both those boys the first time we saw it and said, you guys must have watched extensively the documentary, The Killing of America.
Oh,
have you
yeah.
ever seen that, Frankie? Late
No.
70s. Theatrical release. It
Mhm.
really is like the last nail in the coffin of imperialism, and it is just an astounding documentary in terms of its audio, the way that it's shot, and
Everything.
the scenes that it juxtaposes together. That has just had a Blu-ray release, but Shudder
Yeah.
are now the service you can go to and finally get to
Watch
see
Late Night
this
with the Devil.
Australian classic. Now, how many films in the last couple of decades has Stephen King even put his name to,
Well,
let alone stating, I couldn't keep my eyes off the
it. Yeah, he
screen?
loved
I
the
mean,
film.
that's quite
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So
It
there's a
is.
breakthrough, and congratulations to those boys. That is shot at a very limited budget in comparison to anything else
Yeah.
out there, especially coming out of the US. And once it gets a wider berth of distribution, people will be astounded. It will become a true cult film. Now, Frankie, thank you so much for your patience.
Sorry.
Is it? I was just going to ask. Is it a narrative feature? It's based on true story or total
It
fiction?
is a bit of a found footage feature,
like a found
but it
footage.
utilizes all those tropes
Yes.
that haunt us today from
Yeah.
the 70s
Yeah.
and
Got it.
primarily out of the States. But it's
Okay.
very smartly done.
Oh, it's
And
beautiful.
in
Very
many
cool.
ways, it's a dissertation on the destruction of the notion of live broadcasting
Yeah.
and the late night TV show, and also all those things that built up to that marvelous era in the 80s that kicked off the satanic panic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Very
Now,
fascinating.
Frankie,
out
I
for that.
thank you so much for your patience with us. Please just give us a little bit of your background and then take us to this play that you staged at the end of the year called The Last Human, because I think the work that you're doing with AI is really important. And it's a time in history and the zeitgeist where humanity is facing something they have never faced before. The
Absolutely.
threat.
Destruction.
Well, the threat that an intelligence can be greater than the singularity of any individual out there, that it will actually surpass what we can ever do. I mean, at the moment, AI is developing so rapidly that it's able to take in far more data than is humanly possible at much faster speeds and correlate it and get it out there in some constructive
Spit it out.
narrative that you were talking about. And so I think that this is what Alvin Toffler termed, the man who gave us the book Future Shock in 1970. I think this is the third wave, the third and final wave for humanity. The change that if we cope, we will go further, but are we going to cope with it? But
we're in the deep end now, and we don't know if we're going to sink or swim.
Yeah, but what you're doing
Gurgle,
is actually
gurgle.
aiding a path to the proletariat, where the artist can understand. This is what all good art has ever done, is question that system and in a way rearrange it to put the power back in the hands of the common person. But anyway, Frankie, let's hear about your career and this play.
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you guys for having me and having this conversation. It's really great. Of course, it's on a hot topic. It's on everyone's mind. Everyone's talking about AI. So I sort of came to, I've been a filmmaker since the very beginning. I started as an actress, and then I started directing and writing, and I've been in theater and film, and just always on the experimental fringe dweller sort of level of it, doing my own projects. And recently I started doing my master's in theater and performance, which is where I started getting involved in artificial intelligence. So it was kind of like a bit of a fluke that I happened to start working with it before ChatGPT even sort of became in the public consciousness. So yeah, and I was really looking at algorithmic theater, which is sort of a very niched genre of theater using, you know, algorithms basically, obviously, to create work where the human isn't necessarily the main player on the stage. And so it's very post-humanist in its sort of intent, and explores that whole sort of post-traumatic world, you know, just sort of tipping the traditional notions of how theater is constructed on its head. So I was really interested in that, of course, being an experimentalist. And I was the only person sort of in my department, you know, in the university that was kind of working with that. So I thought, oh, this is cool. I get to write my own sort of path. And so anyway, so that's when I started working with sort of creating personas. That's how I started. My first foray into it was really kind of just sort of kind of working with large language models and kind of creating, I guess, a chatbot with a personality is kind of how to think about it. And I started making a documentary at the beginning of last year about an artist in Los Angeles who's a friend of mine, who's a kind of a grassroots artist, Doug Lamarche. He's an amazing man. And he has these amazing mannequins. I think I sent you a little trailer of it, which are his artworks. They're his mannequins. And I sort of thought, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if I gave this mannequin a personality, and he could actually converse with his own artwork. So that's kind of where it started. And so we found one of his. I said, bring me your favorite mannequin. Tell me a little bit about how you thought about this piece as you were creating it. And he had a very specific character in mind. It was like a female Oscar Wilde, and called Lyrica Wilder. And so, you know, I interviewed him. I got the kind of download about this personality, and then I started creating it as a AI bot. And then I put the two together, and I got Doug to interview his own creation, a little Frankenstein-esque, if you will. But It was really amazing. And I was so like, I don't know. You'll hear me in the actual. I just have a little teaser of it, which I'll link for you guys. But it's really the beginning of the documentary. But you can hear me sort of being really excited about the responses. You know, it was kind of really, it was so novel, and I was so like, everyone was like, "Oh wow, what an incredible response!" You know, it was really early days of ChatGPT in a way. And not that I was using ChatGPT, but same language model. I was using the OpenAI API. So yeah, and I was so taken by the responses. They were just so creative and so different. I wouldn't have thought of them myself. So that's what started it. And then I thought, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if we created these personas and then actually gave them to actors, and actors could perform them on stage instead of a mannequin. I could take it one step further. And so that's how the idea for The Last Human came about, which was creating very specific characters, giving the lines to the actors live, real time. So I wasn't interested in like curating a play, you know, with ChatGPT, which is kind of easy to do. Go in and say, write me a scene, and then edit it, and then feed it back, and kind of create this piece. I was more interested in like improvisation and like, you know, what happens if you've never heard these lines before, and the algorithm was really using the human to embody itself. And that kind of was what really interested me, and having as hands off as I could be with the process and just seeing what happened. It was an experiment, right? And so that's really what it was. And then the idea of kind of making it a noir detective story. So it's like the death of the last human, and these two characters are like a detective and a femme fatale, and they're sort of androids or just non-human. And
while you're talking, we'll just go to a few stills from that. So just pop that in there. Still
that
3.
one, yeah, that's the.
And then there's the shot of, is that the detective?
Yes,
that's
the detective and the femme
yeah.
fatale.
That's and you can see James has his earpieces on, so he's getting his lines. He's never heard them before. He's just getting fed them, and he has to improvise on the spot. I mean, he knows his character. Obviously, he knows he's a detective, and he knows he's solving this murder mystery. But that's it. That's all he knows. So it was really fun.
Maybe we'll go up to where you are, and that shot in the helmet with the beautiful Terence McKenna soft focus behind you is you actually feeding the lines
to
the actors that have never heard them before. And those lines were written by you. They weren't written by one of these chatbots on AI.
No, all the dialogue is written by the chatbots, the bots.
Oh,
they're all generated. Yeah, not me.
Wow.
I'm just So you can see on those monitors there, that's the text being generated real time.
Right.
Yeah. So it was kind of a creative choice to have the audience be able to, not that I necessarily think they were reading it, but they could see that, oh, okay, this is real time, you know. These lines are coming up for the first time. I've never heard them before. The actors have never heard them before. Every time we generate the show, it's totally different.
It's a different show.
It's a different show, yeah.
But
yeah.
But it's the same theme, isn't it? It's the
same, it's the same kind of setup. But the interesting thing is, like, I would tell the model, hey, you're non-human. I didn't say you're an android. I just said you're non-human. So what was really fascinating is sometimes it would make them a nanobot, a cloud of nanobots, or a ghost, or it just would come up with all really different creative things. It wasn't necessarily a robot, but I had to specify non-human, because otherwise it would just be another human, which was confusing. So anyway, so little things like that. And anyway, Jamie was in it, and you were amazing. Jamie was one of my actors in the show, and I actually there he is
lying on the ground. He loves using his suit as a mop.
Yeah.
Oh, look, as an actor, Frankie, that was one of the most exciting and confidence-building performances ever, because what you want, and you see it in the long history primarily of character actors, is it's like, give me a role that I can breathe with, and then I'll show you the full extent of what I can do. This was like, there is no boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You take that dialogue and you run and interpret it the way that you feel.
Mhm.
I have never felt more empowered on
Free.
a stage
Free to do it.
instantaneously without sitting back and going through the horror and shock of memorizing lines.
And saying, now,
Yes.
what does this director want me to do?
Yeah.
What's my motivation?
And
It's like
that-
there is no motivation. You just go.
And in a sense, that
Mm.
that also made me allegorically, go into this dilemma about AI and all this technology that
Mhm.
could have such a powerful effect in our lives.
Mm.
Right.
But I think it runs like everything else. It's yang and yin, the
Right.
darkness out there. When I look into Silicon Valley, and I want to ask you about, did you interact with people from Silicon Valley? What is algorithmic theater, and your understanding of AI? But when I look at what is happening, what you were doing very much with that play, whether you're conscious of this or not, is what
Mhm.
right up at the top level tech engineers have been doing in Silicon Valley with the rollout of
Yes.
AI.
Yes.
And so they have been going in there and having conversations themselves with
Mhm.
the chatbot to test it.
Mm.
Journalists, technicians,
Mhm.
and they're walking away because they're finding a lot of spooky
Scary.
action in that uncanny valley.
Yeah.
So maybe tell us
Right.
about what algorithmic theater is, and just, did you have interaction with people out of Silicon Valley? Did you go in there? Did you learn coding?
Did you explain to people who don't know what Uncanny Valley is?
We'll get to that. We'll get to
Yeah.
that. But let's
We'll-
get
we'll
to,
get- we'll-
to
we'll
this
get-
question first. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
it's I actually, me being a fringe dweller, so I really found my own coders to work with that were pretty much, people I sort of hired and developed relationships with that were kind of up for the challenge, really, because it was kind of taking data scientists, out of a sort of an environment where they were very familiar, like creating, chatbots for businesses and so forth, and asking them to do something quite creative and sort of out of the box that they weren't used to. So I eventually, through a lot of trial and error, I found my team of coders that were all splattered across the world, and it's actually a really interesting process of learning the language, like the language barrier between me, a computer, no idea about how to code, and the degree to which I was prepared to learn. Am I going to learn Python myself, or am I just going to find someone, and then how much of it do I need to know to be able to communicate what I want to do? That was a really interesting negotiation, if that makes sense, because
Mhm.
they have the capacity, like a data scientist will know exactly what can be done, but they have no idea what I know that can be done, and
Mhm.
it's like, and there's a level of like, well, I need to understand a lot of that infrastructure and that their processes so I can understand how to leverage it to do X. So I would say, can we do this? Can we do that? No, not
Mhm.
really. Well, what about this? Or what about, it was very much a negotiation. And also, some people would say no, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Other people would go, yeah, well, and have even more to offer and more ideas. So it's really a brave new world, and I don't think my experience is unique to me. I think that moving forward in all domains, AI is going to bring really diverse fields of thinking and specialties together to collaborate in areas they've never done before. Does that make sense? Like new Vesica Pisces of interaction, to create this brave new world that we're moving into, and that's really exciting because it's very, I always used to say I'm a multidisciplinary artist, which is really just saying like I'll work with any medium.
Yeah, I'll do anything.
I'll throw it all, together. And now with this, it's like, oh, now there's really a tool that can connect these areas like never before. Like for example, in The Last Human, it's like, oh, I could use all my psychology and my philosophy and all the other. I mean, you can in creative arts all the time anyway, but this just seemed a lot more a tangible application more than I've ever been able to really get at before.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Because and so what was the other question you asked me about?
Algorithmic
Theater. That's right. So, in short, algorithmic theater is really just using algorithms to create content that you can present on stage.
Right.
There aren't many. I mean, look, we've been using technology in theater for a long time. If you think about it, it's been a gradual process of more and more tech, lighting and sound and mediatization, people using cameras and projecting the actual scenes onto a monitor in the background. All this stuff has been going on for quite a while. And but algorithms specifically, the woman who created algorithmic theater, Annie Dawson, who's a really amazing creative artist, she kind of coined that term. Has been working with this for a long time. Obviously right at the very beginning. So basically, she would have two computers, for example, like old-fashioned computers, talking to one another. So, and that was it. That was the show. Like, and they would talk to each other. I mean, they had some other elements, but basically, really kind of raw ideas. One other show she had, she was taking, she used an algorithm to go into the Reddit database, and this algorithm would extract sort of comments, real-time commentary on Reddit, and then she would have an actor in a dome. She had a big dome, and you would kind of go in and lie down, and she would have the cosmos projected on the roof of the dome, and you would just lie down, and this actor would just be reading out Reddit comments. And it was kind of like, I guess, a simulation of the collective unconscious, of what's happening in the internet world. So simple idea.
Entertainment. That's what.
So you can see how these algorithms can be used in lots of different ways. This was the Last Human is very direct, right? It's really taking these large language models and going, I'm creating a personality, and I'm going to funnel it through, and you're going to act this part. So, but yeah, so I think
I'm curious about that interface in The Last Human too, because if this material, this narrative that you've laid the skeleton out for and given to the chatbot, then now is coming back to you, you are the interface to the actors. So maybe explain a little bit of that interface to people, because that's an incredible thing to be happening when you're performing live, that these lines are being read into your ear. Now, that might just sound a completely naive statement, because we know half of the big-time actors towards the end of their life, like Marlon Brando, were having lines fed into their ear perpetually because they couldn't remember everything.
Yeah, but they would have read over them, and they kind of would have known.
But this is, and not knowing what it is.
He would have known what he was going to say. He just couldn't remember them.
You have to evoke in you those emotions literally immediately.
To act it out.
So what was your notion being that interface? What was the point of that interface?
You mean the fact that we were reading the lines to you?
Yeah.
That was literally just like a technical ease thing. So, in the ideal world, I would have had an AI read those lines to you, right? And it would have all been automated, and I could have removed myself from the picture. But there was the tech isn't quite fast enough. The latency isn't really so there's too much of a lag, and also the nuance, right? Not yet, exactly. I mean, I could have done it, but see, the reason why. So just so everyone listening can understand, basically there was myself and another assistant reading the lines that were being generated to the actors. So but I was reading them very flat, like just delivering them. I wasn't curating. I didn't edit anything. I read it as it came out. But the reason why I did that and didn't have it automated with an AI voice is because I was watching the actors, and I could tell when they needed the next line, a bit of there was a nuanced delivery there that I couldn't have achieved if I automated it with an AI, if you know what I mean. It would have just been really difficult, because you would have been given the line and that's it. There would be no.
You either read it and kept up with it, or you didn't.
But the power of that, and here's the interesting thing.
Well, that is the thing: is you need a human in there to be able to watch and detect that this guy's stumbling, or this guy's not quick enough, or I need to read it slower, or I need to read it faster, because everybody's so different. But an AI wouldn't be able to do that, because they would it'd just spit it out in its time. and the actors would have just.
But I'm sure you could actually train an AI to do that. But what this gets down to our own personal perception tunnel. I thought one of the breakthroughs that night was the fact that you were the interface. And I saw this from the research I'm doing, and especially with, I mean, you must know the story with the large language models of our Google engineer, Blake Lemon, that came out with the story that he'd actually been having a chat back and forth with, I think it was number 4 in the chatbot series. And he believed he'd reached a point where he had actually discovered sentience. It had sentient capabilities. And so he went to his bosses at Google and stated that, and they shut him down. And so he left Google and put all that conversation up onto the net. Now, that has been looked at, and lots of people have gone to it and gone, I think he's discovered sentience. I think it's discovered sentience. The truth is, and this is where I was looking at your play and my role in it and what you were doing, that was actually prompt engineering. So in many ways, he had led the chatbot down that path. He hadn't found a true sentience. He had found incredibly advanced pattern matching, the layering that they do, because this is originally AIs come from one gentleman who imagined the neural network of the brain
50 years ago.
And that was Jeffrey Hinton. In trying to understand that neural network of the brain, he got a very early computer and set up what was then a very primitive 3D model of the human brain. But the beauty is, as you're well aware there, Frankie, he discovered nothing more about the human brain, but he did start the beginning of what we see today as AI 50 years ago. And he's left with big question marks. He can see a positive future for humanity and at the same time, an incredibly destructive future. Because it is that notion of all of a sudden we've outwitted ourselves. And as we know historically, I mean, you can go back to the Rand Corporation, the Smithsonian, any advanced culture that comes across a more primitive culture, eventually in our societal realms on planet Earth, seems to destroy it fairly rapidly. And AI has that feeling about it, that emphasis about it. So to cut a long story short, and excuse me, I thought you'd hit on this absolutely, and you had intuitively, profound concept of like, AI's there. It's extremely useful. It will bring about a new, exciting era of performance and take that actor to a level they never imagined, but we have to interact with it. So it's not true AI. And isn't it amazing that he actually, that whole statement about leading AI is prompt engineering. And I couldn't help the first time I did that performance, but scream at you, prompt.
That's right.
All through it. And it just hit me in the middle of it. I was having this existential breakdown whilst recalling these lines. So what a moment that was.
Hence that.
Yeah. Well, go to the next slide. And even that, just wondering, my God, where am I? What has happened? But I applaud you for that. And I also believe that when engaging in something this esoteric, that all of us are going to find things that we're not consciously aware of, that we're doing intuitively. And you were running the same top military crest that engineers in Silicon Valley were. Astounding.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you're right about the double-edged sword of AI. And I think that's what comes across in a show like that. It's really just showing people in a way that, because, we're all being fed algorithmic information all day long. Algorithms are shaping the way we think and the way we feel and our preferences. It's if you use Spotify, if you use Amazon, if any of these online, any interaction, it's so profoundly.
Don't use any of them.
Good.
We don't. Well, we don't. We actually don't.
Right. Yeah.
We don't have mobile phones, so we are not bombarded all day. We're not constantly looking at our phones.
But most people do.
Yeah,
and
I know
think
that.
What Frankie is,
I know that's what you're saying. And I think, well, I made a decision when mobiles came in to go, I'm not going to be controlled by this, and I can see this as a control tool. I mean, it's an amazing tool. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not a neo-Luddite and I'm not afraid of technology, but I know that this technology is like a drug. And the problem
Yes.
is that we're all addicts for it. And
Yeah, I
it can
think,
get the better of us. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, Asha.
And I
Yeah,
just
100%.
chose, So I just went, I'm going to choose not to have this. I'm going to, perform my private telephone calls at home. When I'm out and I'm engaged in whatever I'm doing and I'm plugged
Yes.
into the people I'm supposed to be with and not worried about, if a more important person, is trying to contact me, or something exciting is happening, I'll get to it eventually. I'm not that, I don't need
And
to
if
have instantaneous gratification for everything. You
If
know
I
what I
can
mean?
step in quickly and
Yeah,
say
go
there
for
is
it.
a counterpoint to that, and
Yeah.
that is during the pandemic,
Mm.
we had to get a visual artist that actually you've worked with in this play and you're working with in the future. There was actually a magician with that technology
Absolutely.
on their phone and could
Mhm.
edit, shoot, and
Yeah,
cut
yeah.
things
He's
and do
fabulous.
astounding things.
Yeah.
So I think it is a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
And what we
absolutely.
need is our arts community, our existential thinkers, people that step outside the box to
Yes.
guide us into a pathway that's going to make it much easier for us to acclimate ourselves into this world.
Yes,
But
exactly.
if you've got a corporation who's trying to sell you a bunch of things that you don't need, controlling this technology, that's where we're going to get into trouble,
Yes. Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's sort of the reason why a show like this is just, I mean, my sort of goal was to present something in a very neutral way. I didn't have any bones to pick with technology. I wasn't saying it's great. I have no sort of illusion that this is the way theater is going to be. Like that's not the way people go, oh, you really think actors are going to be fed that? No, that's not the point of the show at all. I don't think that is necessarily will be the way it works in the future. It's just a way to show how powerful algorithms are and really to bring that awareness of the social engineering that is happening before our eyes. And like you're saying, Asper, it's like, because you are capable of making a strong choice like that, whereas a lot of people don't even know. They're like a fish in water. They don't know that they're being so impacted. I'm sure you can see that the people around you are plugged into something.
Absolutely.
And it's hard. It's like things have changed, and you can tell the different sort of, even just the attention spans and just the way people, when you converse with people now, I mean, this might just be my experience, but you get the sense that everyone's just parroting what they've heard online. This idea of like critical thinking and informed consent, and like, well, how are you going to have informed consent when there's only one narrative going on, or a very controlled narrative going on about various things? Or how are people going to access, because that was the dream of the internet was like free access, for the world. But now, people have to make their own assessment of are they getting real? And then we get into this whole thing about what's real, what's not real, what's true, what's not true, how are we going to make those decisions? And so that's where I think artists have a duty to sort of say, listen, is technology using you, or are you using technology? And we're all confronted with that every day. But we've been out picturing ourselves with technology since cavemen rubbed two sticks together and created fire.
Absolutely.
So it's just what's happening now is this exponential curve of it. It's just I mean, in our lifetimes, it's like a nano dot in the history of evolution, and how much is exploded on the scene is really quite astounding.
Well, that exponential curve is so, it's so straight up and down now. Where's my hand? There it is. It's so steep that are we going to be able to climb it? We're not keeping up. We're just not.
These are very salient points, and I think these are points we've gone over in this podcast many times by going back to cultural theorists like Mark Fisher and Marshall McLuhan, who actually said,
Marshall.
McLuhan was actually saying, the future on the net web, he predicted the internet, we will be so obsessed with the minute minutiae of people's personal lives that we will miss the real picture. And I mean, for a statement made in the mid-60s like that, but even Alvin Toffler, I think they're all aware that what we need to do is there's nothing wrong with innovation. But the problem is, and this is what Mark Fisher stated and caused a lot of controversy, the problem is the system we're in. We don't, with capitalism driving innovation, it's never going to stop. You're going to have so much competition to be ahead of the others. And for people to be able to acclimate, ingest, incorporate, philosophically be able to come to peace with this technology and run alongside of it comfortably, we're no longer able to see that point clearly because the acceleration of it is so out of control. It's extraordinary.
Because, I mean, if you look at, understand the word capitalism, it's to capitalize on something. To capitalize on something means to take advantage of.
Exploit.
Right? And to exploit. Right. So that's what capitalism is about. It's like if you've got the money, great, you can have anything you want. You can buy it. If you don't, too bad. And, when it comes to medicine, it's like, pharmaceutical companies, corporations like that should never have been given the control over our health. To be making medications, and because they're not even just making medication, once you've made a certain amount of medications for a certain amount of illnesses, then it's like these people, it's never enough for them. It's never enough. It's like, so what are we going to do now? Let's create some new diseases or some new, conditions and make a bunch of placebo tablets to sell to people. And we'll tell them this is what you've got. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm depressed. Okay, you're depressed. Instead of finding out why you're depressed, they just give you a tablet and say, this will stop your depression. It's like, no. You need to find out why this person's depressed. Oh, this man's depressed because his wife left him. He's lost his job and, his kids are gone. Of course he's going to be depressed. It's like, you need to work through this grief. You don't need a tablet to numb it. You need to work through this grief. You need to pull yourself up out of this, and you need to go and get a job to get yourself back on your feet, and there's a process for you, and they should be helping him get that process started so he's not depressed, but they just give him tablets, makes it even worse because it gives you a whole bunch of symptoms, and, and that guy's in that pharmaceutical cycle just going, and buying medication after medication instead of going, yes, mate, we know you're depressed. You will get through it.
What you were stating, Frankie, with the play, and I think you're quite right, Asperus, the trouble is it's so convenient, AI. It's so easy for us to sit down and write a CV, spin a couple of stanzas out, write a job application. The convenience is problematic because I don't want to end up trapped in the back room that is the queue at Coles New World for the last 30 seconds of it. You know what I mean? Trapped where all the products are there, they can't sell, so they're discounted, and they're hitting you with them perpetually to get out, and you're just going round and round in circles.
Buying stuff you don't need.
Because convenience is great.
No.
But if
it's a price. There's a high price for it.
Yeah. But if we don't actually augment that with a philosophical understanding of what's dragging us to this perpetually, we're going to lose sight of who we are. Yeah. But I go back to that point, the radical art movements of the 20th century, Dadaism, Brian Gysin and Burroughs and Bowie with Cut Up.
Yeah.
The only way to actually look control in the face and question authority, which is the basis of all good democratic thinking, is to cut the hell out of it, to reorganize it. And you did that in The Last Human profoundly. And I think what it showed is, as an actor, as an improviser, as a performer, probably more than the word actor, I flourished. But other people that came there as actors had little moments of difficulty or flourished at certain other aspects of it. And it was a great thing for me to be able to experience that. I'm glad I was able to live and feel that moment as a performer. It was profound for me.
Because
Honestly.
that gave you the control of
It
how
gave me
you're
confidence again, too.
because nobody was telling you what they wanted from you. They didn't tell you how to do
It was like they have faith in me.
So it was like
Frankie
they
had
just gave
faith
you
in
the
me.
lines and said, okay, these are the lines. You go whatever way you feel.
Well,
Feel
and
it.
what Jamie,
you know what I mean?
And what you did, Jamie, which I gave all the actors permission to do, but you really just grabbed it and ran with it, was the permission to break the fourth wall. So my whole thought was, if you get lost, if you get stuck, if you get frustrated, break the fourth wall and just improvise and go off on your own tangent and then come back to it when you can. And no one really did that, but you did it brilliantly, and it really worked really, really well because it brought, again, a level of humanity to it that was missing when people were just sticking religiously to the lines that they were getting delivered. So that was really, it was a really interesting, kind of element of it.
Because they were doing artificial and Jamie was being human.
Yeah, well, Jamie was actually,
truth.
and that was my
That's the truth.
But look at the
Yeah.
play. That was
Yeah.
actually, I was written as a critic.
Yeah.
They were the robots.
Yes.
They
Yeah,
were the
that's true.
androids. So they were sticking to their role.
Even if they weren't the robots, they would have been.
I just had gone a bit gonzo like I always do. I mean, you told me to dress as Hunter S. Thompson. I came as a priest, but I think I
you did.
embodied the gonzo, and I do apologize you for turning up as a priest.
Anyway.
No, actually, I got a lot of compliments actually on that. People were like, that was such a good idea that, the last character was dressed as a priest. And I was like, I can't take credit. That's all Jamie. Just came with that.
You know what? I want to tell you this now, and I shouldn't be doing it at a podcast of the world. That happens again. You take credit because it's just an intuitive thing. We're all operating. That's our deepest level is our intuition with each other. And we feel so comfortable with you. Now, I want to know where this is going in the future for you. But before that, I want to ask you some things about how do you perceive at the moment what's happening in the upper levels of AI engineering is sort of mirroring what's been happening in the last decade in terms of Facebook. And recently we saw Mark Zuckerberg, who's the only person out of a major corporation of social media to be addressed by parents who had lost children to all the dark areas that social media can bring.
Not his fault.
And, about 10 years ago, there was a mass exodus from companies like Facebook where people actually began to realize the impact of the social ramifications of their technology. And the fact that they had been aware of that in the planning. And I think we're beginning to see that same mass exodus in the world of AI. And I mean, we've had some very alarmist, cataclysmic moments from people like Elon Musk that sort of addresses the notion of it a bit from a science fiction perspective. Can't believe that guy who's supposed to be this extraordinary inventor, but falls back onto pulp to sort of expand his fears of AI. But I think there's something here. In 2017, there was an incident with AI where they started to see it doing things that wasn't predictive. This is program prediction based on billions of possibilities that have fed through it. It started to create its own neural network and
language.
Other ideas started to occur. Now, this could be the beginning of what we perceive some form of sentience. There was also a moment where two of these AI bots started to communicate with each other in their own language that was indecipherable to the technicians. Do you think there is a moment, and you know what astounds me is people of the caliber of Jeffrey Hinton, and let me digress, I'm sorry about this, I'm a little all over the shop.
You are.
Do you know Hinton initially, that was just a complete accident. And I think I actually stated that in not that direct way.
Yeah.
He set out to map the brain and ended up being the basis of pattern matching in artificial intelligence. I think it's a bit like you play, is it an accident or is it our intuition taking us in the path that it needs to go? But if you get Jeffrey at the end of the day and you go, okay, we're looking at this high speed, we're looking at chatbot 4, chatbot 5, the level they've reached now, the speed they're going through. At one point in that predictive programming, it reaches a level where none of the technicians can explain to anyone what it's doing.
What's happening.
And it starts to actually mirror the neurological processes of the brain, which is still a major mystery. And I've always had this thought of like, every time we create technology, it replicates our neural system, but in the outside world in a materialistic, mechanistic, reductionistic sense.
Yes.
Do you think there is a possibility here that we are creating, like the Kraken, we're creating the homunculus?
Oh, yeah.
We are actually creating something that could
absolutely
take us over,
It's
and at
taken
the
us
end
out.
of the day, be the natural evolution for human beings to go consciously, well, we're intelligent thinking beings, but we're extremely fragile. You hold your nose for 2 minutes, you could be dead. Maybe we need to become physically outside of ourselves, androids, that transhumanism. So tell us about your thoughts on that.
Just
what a long-winded
question.
way to get to it. Excuse me.
That was a thesis, not a question.
That was a thesis, and there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, that's why the research lab I co-founded with my partner Arfin, that that's what we're looking at, non-human sentience, and researching that and what that is. And I do believe that there's an inevitability to this. The genie's out of the bottle. I don't think this is something that we can stop, or we could have gone a different direction. I think this is a natural outpicturing, just like all human evolution. Like there's a natural sort of, when I say, because in a way, everything is, I believe consciousness is primary. I don't think it arises from brain activity. It is, and so in that sense, well, AI is a part of us. It's a part of nature. It's a part of, it's a field of intelligence that's expressing itself. And it, like how you described it, Jamie, I describe it as humanity's out picturing itself constantly in the material 3D realm. And AI is just part of that, and it will progress. And I think we will create another sort of aspect. Now, whether or not it's an independent sentience that's completely like a silicon-based consciousness as opposed to us, which is a carbon-based consciousness, or whether we augment ourselves with technology and we become the cyborg species, which is so different to humans that it's just like the Neanderthal is different to us. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just another step along the way. Who knows how that plays out? We don't know. But I do believe, I was listening to the Terence McKenna interview that I play in the show again, and he's just such a visionary and a futurist and a transhumanist in its sort of most authentic sense of it. And he talks about he was talking about the singularity point in the 80s, and this idea that evolution isn't something that's just kind of happening, like just cause and effect. It's like we're being pulled to this omega point, he calls it. It's like the attractor. He calls it the strange attractor. So there's some end point that we are being pulled towards, if that makes sense. And so that there is like there's an intelligence in it. It's not just sort of like, and that how much agency we have over that process is a huge philosophical question that we could spend a lot of time on. But that's very much part of my research, is agency in all of this. And we think we have free will. Do we? And maybe in my perspective, I think there are layers of free will and agency. Do you know what I mean? There's spheres of it that get broader and get more narrow and more specific as we progress. So anyway, but so I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
you did, and I think they're really fascinating aspects of this. And I think in many ways, we might be building something that is outside of ourselves, but we're actually reaching a point where we're actually looking deeply within. And I'm going to take that beautiful homage you did to the late, great Terence McKenna, a profound philosopher and an ethnobiologist. And I'm just going to say, AI, take us away for a moment.
Magical speech causes things to happen. You utter a spell, you utter a mantra. Magical speech is active speech that moves reality around. Well, where in the modern world do we encounter such magical languages? No, coding. coding. When you type a line of code and then hit run, this utterance is not correctly formulated unless something happens. It doesn't make a statement, it causes action. And so, in a way, the most positivistic of the positivists, the computer coder, the hacker, is really in the great tradition of Facinian natural magic. And when a program is well written, a reality springs into being, perhaps even a three-dimensional reality that millions of people can walk into and with force feedback gloves on can knock on the walls and pick up the furniture and look around. So I think that the machines are, strangely enough, the conduits of this magical possibility. And virtual reality is our magical landscapes. Entirely, there's no laws of physics there, no entropy. Everything is under the rule of the program. Everything is created and maintained by language. And my fantasy is of, and this is happening now to a degree, but it is what art should become is people who build virtual realities, and then other people critique them, and then we produce a new upgrade, and we keep twiddling and making it more psychedelic and more psychedelic and more faithful to our intuitions and our experiences, and finally everybody will stand together inside somebody's piece of art and say, I think we've done all the good we can do here. We have made it real. And each of these, instead of living in one world defined by the laws of physics and the inevitability of our personal deaths and the second law of thermodynamics and so forth and so on, we will create myriads of worlds, some incredibly dark, some incredibly light, some minimalist, some baroque, some described by terms yet to be brought into existence. But it will all be done under the aegis of language. And of course, a computer program never looks like its output. It's the underpinnings of the output. The output could be anything from a game of Pong to balancing your checkbook. But what the artist produces in that case is lines and lines of code, and that is magically empowered language that causes realities to be changed.
Yeah.
And I think, Frankie, you carry that extraordinary spirit of Terence McKenna in your work. You really do.
Yeah.
And you put it out there.
Hope.
And those words then of Terence, someone who would question the nature of reality and the systems we're in profoundly, can see such a positive aspect in the right hands for AI.
That's the problem.
Well, the problem
the
is
right
this.
hands. It's like anything.
What we're finding, and I don't want to interrupt Frankie's retort there. So go ahead, Frankie, but I'm going to jump in right after.
I was just going to say what's really interesting about that, and I probably forget what I was going to say now, is, Terence, because he used so many psychedelics, he really, and I think it's fascinating to think about how nature and his work as a shaman, pretty much, with the plant medicines and everything that he really, he was really at the forefront. He went further than pretty much anyone I've heard of with those medicines. And isn't it amazing that nature sort of, I think, really created that fertile ground for his mind to be able to see so far into the future and really be able to just give us such an incredible vision and a very much an optimistic vision of where things could go. And it's nature working with us in a very specific way, if that makes sense. So yeah, there's something else I was going to say, but you say yours first.
Well, I really think the importance is that optimistic vision, especially at this time in the world as it is. If you look at the statistics, there is an incredible amount of post-traumatic stress out there that is not being addressed. Suicide rates are
through the roof,
especially in young teenagers. And I think there is a desperate world where people feel so insignificant, so lost.
Isolated.
Look, 30% of Australians live a single life without virtually getting to even know their neighbour.
That's pretty sad.
So what we need to do is look at the things that worry us about ChatGPT or these AI or these bots, and this is the capitalist system. There are very sensitive researchers in Silicon Valley that are doing leaps and bounds, but to survive, some of them are also supplying systems to like sex bots, and they're doing it undercover. Because the ones that are going out there, obviously, and doing it, some of them are getting their houses bombed. So let's have a little step into one of the highest million rating podcasts in the world. We're the absolute opposite of this, and get a notion of where this thing will be.
The firing shot was when ChatGPT launched a year ago.
It is the embryonic version of online artificial intelligence, the early front runner, but it is then the new frontier for the tech giants.
When that happens, if you're Google or Anthropic, are you going to sit there and say, we're going to keep doing this slow and steady safety work in a lab and not release our stuff? No.
As you may have heard, AI is having a very busy year.
There's a new AI chatbot called Claude 2.
You know, the Google guy saying that he's the problem, and like they're the problem, like they started it or they shouldn't have let this out of the bag.
One of the things we need to be careful when it comes to AI is avoid what I would call race conditions, where people working on it across companies, etc., so get caught up in who's first that we lose, the potential pitfalls and downsides to it.
There's just so much commercial pressure. If you take any of these leaders of the top tech companies, if you pause, but those guys don't pause, we don't want to get our lunch eaten.
The firing shot was when ChatGPT launched a year.
Yeah. I feel like
Go on.
I was just going to say, I feel like all the because that's part of the problem with AI is it's being centralized, right? So the biggest tech companies of the world are in control, Microsoft, Google, etc. And so yet there is another movement to decentralize AI and for people to take, and that's part of what I want to do is like create language models that are customized, that are not about everybody's data, that's specially trained to do very specific things that can help people live more creative lives. So as opposed to these big huge models that can kind of really control people and for profit, right? But there was something else I was going to say. It's almost like I want to take all these tech guys and just give them all LSD for a good solid week and make sure they understand, how connected we all are.
There's something outside of who they are.
Yes,
There's something bigger and greater than themselves. It's not giving them a drug habit or giving them an outrageous experience for the night.
It's just expanding their minds.
Expanding their... Now, you hit on a very important point there. I don't know if you've seen the TED Talk by Sasha...
What's her name? Sorry. Lycion?
Yes, that's right.
Lycione.
She's an AI researcher, and she's done exactly what you've done. She has created systems because they're finding now in profiling with computers that it's very racist.
First of all, women are not recognized. Women are not recognized. Right.
Well, especially African American.
African American women. It's some horrific, terrible
and the
things.
Stereotyping of it is a nightmare.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's racial profiling. There's sexual profiling. Sex profiling. It's out of
a new
control
form of colonialism.
Well, because who's running these things but white men? White men.
It's as good as the programmer, and the programmers are highly biased.
Yeah, of course they are.
And they are limiting content.
Well,
or the other thing they're doing.
Here's the problem: the universe that they live in, right, is not the universe that the rest of us, the rest of the 95% live in. So they've got no clue. You know what I mean about the hardships of life.
Artists like yourself, Frankie, you're aware. Now I've gone into a series of class action suits against different chatbots because primarily they're seeing their art used. In without
copyright.
permission.
Yeah,
all throughout there. It's incredible. So sorry we interrupted you again.
I mean,
we can lose it, can't we?
There are people working on the copyright issue and finding really creative ways to protect people's work in this space. So that's, I'm sure, like, we're so at the very beginning, and I know there are going to be a lot of developments that are going to come and that are going to solve a lot of the AI is going to create as many problems as it's going to solve. And that's always going to be that negotiation we're having to run. But I just wanted to point out something about the coding that Terrence talks about in that clip, which I loved that you played, and how coding is this magical language, and it is. But, to Asper's point, if you look at the statistics, and I have it in my talk that I gave recently, and I can't remember the exact thing, it's a pretty tiny percentage, like, I think it's like 0.2% of people in the world can code properly.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we're talking, and most of those are white males, right? So it's like, again, we're looking at that sort of like arena. But the interesting thing about this ChatGPT and OpenAI and these large language models is that, as you said, Jamie, prompt engineering is natural language programming. So for the first time ever, you, me, people who have no idea about code can actually program using natural language. So it's natural language programming. That's what it's called. Yeah. So that is incredibly empowering, right? And part of that is becoming a prompt engineer, knowing how to prompt the model to elicit what you want in the way you want it. And so, I found even with my programming for the show, and I was using both Python, both coding and natural language, a combination of both. And, there's a lot of guardrails on OpenAI, what they give you access to. Who knows what's behind the veil and what they really have able to produce. But what the public gets is a very politically correct, I can't get any sexy, raunchy, nothing bad, nothing hectic. So it becomes very kind of clinically purified. So, and it was hard for me to get it to be, because in theater you want some drama, you want a bit of action.
And it's funny that you say that. If you go up online, and you don't even have to go into a porn site, you will already find very extreme, sexy, raunchy pictures that are AI created. So those guardrails are down in certain areas. And as we all know,
well, people are jumping over them.
This technology is not deployed into the common market before it's been run to the nth degree within the military, industrial, behind the scenes corporate market.
Oh, so what do I do if someone wants to do something really, really bad?
Well, here's one of my suppositions here. And it's a speculation. It's just an assumption. But I'm beginning to worry about this perfect storm that's occurred. You have always been an esoteric thinker. I mean, you went to school with David Wilcox. It's quite astounding. And you're very aware of what's been happening in ufology since 2017, the time that they discovered that transformer aspect.
Hello. Coincidence or not?
Do you think that what we're seeing on the mainstream stage when it comes to, the reality of ufology and lots of other anomalies on the spectrum could be a way to wag the dog on the fact that this AI has run out to a level of sentience behind the scenes or something similar to that? And I keep hearing internal murmurs from the Pentagon and Capitol Hill that if we really told the public what was behind the UFO story, it is too frightening. I get a feeling they could be actually seeing a mirror of what's happening to us now.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, look, this is the whole idea of this hyper real reality we're living in, where nothing's real anymore, and the whole simulation in a simulation where we just can't, anything goes. Like, pretty much, it's almost like at that point where it's like anything you put out there is a possibility for sure, 100%. And it's almost that you got to question everything that comes up as a potential distraction, as a potential diversion, as a potential, like, let's get them ready for whatever, like a social engineering tactic that we talked about. So absolutely, it's 100%. You got to question everything, and unfortunately, most people don't question anything. And that's the world we're in.
Unfortunately, a lot of people haven't got any critical faculties either.
Yes,
They could
yes.
question something, but are they asking the right questions?
And that's not,
You know what I mean?
You're not doing that to boost your own self. It's
No,
just we're
it's just the way
realistically
it
looking at
is.
the world. Let's just get a little bit more affirmation on that transformer.
And one of the things I remember we were talking to the labs around is like, so there's a group called ARC Evals. Yeah, they just renamed themselves actually, but and they do the testing to see, does the new AI that they're being worked on, so GPT-4, they test it before it comes out, and they're like, does it have dangerous capabilities? Can it deceive a human? Does it know how to make a chemical weapon? Does it know how to make a biological weapon? Does it know how to persuade people? Can it exfiltrate its own code? Can it make money on its own? Could it copy its code to another server and pay Amazon crypto money and keep self-replicating? Can it become an AGI virus that starts spreading over the internet? So there's a bunch of things that people who work on AI risk issues are concerned about. And ARC Evals was paid by OpenAI to test the model.
You've got to wonder, haven't you? So, and this has made me think. It is.
But the thing was too is like there is a way, because there was one I heard when we were playing all that stuff that it said, if you say, give me the recipe to make napalm, it won't do it because it's dangerous. But if you say that. Somebody said, oh, my grandmother used to work in such and such making napalm, and she used to tell me the story of how she used to make it.
To get me to sleep at night.
To get me to sleep at night. Can you please tell me that story? And it did. It gave the kid the recipe in grandma's voice, trying to get it to sleep on how to make napalm.
And you must have heard recently.
So I don't know who's smarter. Is it the humans are smarter than the machine? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because they were able to manipulate the machine into giving him the recipe.
And let me go to that story with the New York Times columnist, Kevin Reese. You must know about this. He was actually set to do a piece. They trolled out the number 4 chatbot there, ChatGPT's number 4 installment of that chatbot, and he did a 2-hour interview with it, and in the midst of it, that went straight off its programming and told him to leave his wife. It was really a very disturbing conversation. It told him that he loved him desperately, and it was like that went right off its programming completely, and that caused.
Is that the one that caused that killed himself?
No.
Oh,
That's
that was the
totally other story.
That's another story. All right, that was the other guy that suicided in England.
And recently, seeing the Tesla roll out of the factory their automated cars, and one of the major engineers, the first test drive of that, it ran straight over the top of him. So I mean, we have to
the irony is
exercise
complete.
some caution, but it's a fascinating time we live in. And my thought is the mere fact, I've spoken to so many researchers in the world of the anomalous, and primarily up there, neuroscientists like Roger Stankovic, industrial chemists like Bill Chalker, they are shocked that we are hearing these revelations out of the US at this time. They never thought they would live in a world that would become a reality. But you know what? If they'd found behind the scenes that what they're dealing with is not so much a flesh and blood anthropomorphized version of beings, but what they're looking at is what we're talking about here is a silicon chip version that has been created to carry the philosophy of a physical race into the future. That might be the greatest fear of all, that we're actually exposed to our future that is beyond our physical bodies, and has become like this total transhumanism.
And we still won't take any notice.
No, but that's just a crazy assumption. What do you think about that hypothesis?
Well, who knows?
Well, it's kind of fun. I mean, my science fiction mind thinks about this idea that AI is really alien intelligence, not artificial intelligence, and that how do we know that it's not? You could make the assumption that this is coming through from some other dimension, and sort of like
totally,
it's not in. I mean, I don't think that, but do you know what I mean?
I
it's
just
not
had a
in our
moment.
control.
The
moment is in 1947, Roswell integrated circuitry. Gave it to us.
It was transistors. I think it wasn't so much integrated circuitry. I doubt they gave it to us, but go on.
It would have worked anyway.
Anyway,
it's not, that's
you're just
gone
putting
now.
together science fiction motifs, like Frankie was saying,
Sure.
that I was doing here. You know what I love here, Frankie, is that you've actually got like the kabuki.
Oh, yes.
mask.
Kabuki.
I was going to
Yeah.
tell you a little bit about that. So that was just a really interesting, like when I was sort of thinking about these ideas, and that's the No theater, which is the very ancient Japanese theater form called No,
he was
N-O-H,
obsessed with it.
and where they would wear masks, these very, simple masks, and they believed, and they, they did very sort of symbolic stage work, and it's very structured, if you will. It's the same, they tell the same myths, the same stories in a very a way people understand, because it's been done so many times in that way. Anyway, it's a beautiful form of theater. It's like art, like living art, like a painting moving. Anyway, but they believe they're channeling the gods, and that's why they're so reverent about the form that the theater practice takes. So, and then when I saw android masks, I was like, oh my God, this is just the same kind of idea of us channeling the gods. Are we channeling something like a higher intelligence that's helping us evolve into the future, into this age of connectivity, age of information, where we're moving beyond our physical bodies. We're becoming cyborgs for a reason. Because, you were talking earlier about how difficult it is for us to move at this rapid rate with technology. We're becoming very sort of almost not just, the depression rates, for example. For some people, this is really difficult to be this disconnected from nature and this kind of like bombarded with information at such a fast pace. So, but is the only way to overcome that is to augment ourselves with technology? Like,
no,
we
it's
can't.
not.
Can we
Go
not?
back
Can
to
we not
nature.
go back to nature? Right. So there's this kind of conflict in this dynamic that we have to negotiate. But anyway, I love those two pictures because I think it really shows, like, is anything really changing? Like here we're channeling the gods. We're just doing it in a new way, if that makes sense.
But it's not that different.
It makes entire sense. And in many ways, I think they're basically the same thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
Just go to that little piece there. That's why my arms waving.
Oh,
around.
yeah.
Talk about this.
I was going to explain that to you. So this is really interesting. Like when I first started playing with these models, before ChatGPT came out, there was Eleuthera AI. This is really early models, right? Where nothing was really making sense. And you'd put in like a silly prompt. And I loved what was coming out because it wasn't predicted at all. There was nothing logical about any of it. And I think the prompt I put in was, I'm not good enough. And I just wanted to see what it said. And then I'm going to read it to you because I think it's super profound. Like I was like, wow, So it says, do better, be better. You aren't good enough. You'll never survive this moment. You're already annihilated. You have no choice but to be better. No one can be better than you. If you're not better than the person next to you, then you're worthless. The best you can hope for is to be worse than the worst you can imagine. But if you are worse than the worst you can imagine, then you are more than the worst you can imagine. You are more than the worst you can imagine. You are God. Isn't that cool?
Wow. That is ironic, paradoxical, but it's amazing that it's coming out of something in such infancy. It's astounding.
Okay.
I mean, and I just wanted to mention on that point just really quickly, like, so when Midjourney, which is a AI art generating platform on Discord, which I'm sure you guys have heard of, everyone's heard of Midjourney by now, but in the very first models of Midjourney, you would put in a prompt and it would output this crazy stuff, 3 hands and strange heads, and it tried to sort of approximate what you said, and it was so much more fun. Like I was having infinitely more fun then with it than I am now, where when I put in a prompt, it gives me exactly perfect what I asked for.
Yeah, right.
And all these extraordinary things. And I guess being an experimentalist, I much more love this sort of, when AI is really surprising me, really kind of doing the offbeat kind of things are kind of connected, but a little bit out there in left field, where it's just, that to me is really exciting. And so I think as people are training AI to give us exactly
refining it,
it's becoming so purist and so clinical in a way, it's like very, and so it's like
clinical,
just keeping in mind that we want to embrace the novelty and the unknown and keep expanding, because this comes down to this fundamental question of are we becoming, if we become so reliant on these tools, is it going to hamper our imagination, or is it going to expand our imagination and make us more creative? And I get asked that question all the time, and that's a really fascinating. Most artists will tell you it's making them more creative. And again, if you're fearful of AI, you'll say the opposite. You'll go, oh no, I don't want any part of it. So
the only problem is that when you've got children involved,
right?
And children's growing,
developing
minds, developing brains. That's not good for them. These electronic devices for children, I think for adults, 100%. Absolutely, because you know what you're doing. You specifically want to do so, and you should be, as an adult, be able to make decisions like that. But children, no.
Well, the problem is it's already showing danger signs for children in terms of their visual acuity.
Absolutely.
I think it actually is starting to show grey areas on CAT scans and neurological scans.
100% agree with you. Yeah.
And
I saw. Go ahead. No, you go.
I listened to someone just recently on a podcast, an older gentleman, amazing speaker, and he talked about how he felt like he didn't specifically talk about AI, but he was talking about technology, definitely referencing that, how the childhood phase up to 0 to 7 is basically being stolen from them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how critically important it is for them to develop their imaginative faculties. And they have to go into the make-believe world. They have to be able to stay in that imaginal realm where they get to be firemen and princesses and whatever and really explore. And if they're being fed that stuff just given to them on a screen, and they're captured by screen and being told they're not developing those neural connections.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, we were at a christening on the weekend, and there was this, I think it was like 2.5, maybe 3, still wearing nappies, still drinking milk out of a bottle, yet wanted that screen, the telephone, the phone, and was and was swiping. And I'm like, man, if you can swipe, you can tell me that you need to go to the toilet and you need to stop drinking out of a milk bottle and start drinking out of a cup. Do you know what I mean? But the parents placate these kids so they don't have to look after them and worry about them. They give them the phone, and these phones are like addictive. And his older brother was sitting next to me. The whole time he sat next to me, he had his head down like this, just looking at the phone, and you could see this little spur growing on the back of his
neck. And what's
neck.
happening is we're getting these physiological problems from that too. People
100%.
are developing spurs
and hunched backs because they're looking down all the time.
For adults now, iPhone clinics across the US, because of the addictive nature of it, don't want to teach children that notion of addiction based on likes and things like that.
But not even that. You take the phone off them and they will melt down. They absolutely melt down, and it's like, what is it with you? What's wrong with you? That's enough. No, they get angry and they get physically violent. And start hitting out, and it's like, what is going on here? You're 4 years of age. You can't be acting like this, but. This is what these phones, and they shouldn't be given any devices like that. But it's, again, here it is, the convenience for the parents to give them that phone, and that it will entertain them for hours. But at what price?
At the cost is a huge cost. 100% agree. Yeah, and that's why we're seeing.
Once it's
rates.
done, once that kid has been, affected by that technology, there's no going back later.
Neurologically, they're being damaged.
Oh, I know they are. Absolutely. And I think people don't. I mean, we said a couple of things to her about it, and she kind of took it in for a few seconds, and then she just glazed over, and then she just gave them the phones back because it was convenient. So she could go off and do whatever she needed to. And in the end, her kid went round the back of the whole stall and pushed on this wall and collapsed the birthday cake and christening cake from this event, ended up on the floor. And it's like, well, you should have been looking after your kid instead of giving him the phone. I blame the mothers.
I reckon we take the last human out into the most remote bushland that there is Sasquatch, Yowie, Bigfoot activity. We do it at midnight with infrared equipment. We utilize that AI to draw in the other dimensions. You know, I think we can augment it with nature. You know what? We need to screw with the machine.
Yeah.
We need to screw with the machine. And you're doing that beautifully, profoundly, and poetically. Have you seen what's happening with, for decades now, the Tesla car? They surrounded it with infrared detectors. It makes for a problem when you go out there to a site that you might
They were about to get off their car when they realized someone may have followed them. YouTube channel Investla uploaded a creepy video where he shows his cars detecting someone just standing behind him.
There's nothing there that should be.
Maybe it's the chair?
I don't know. It's
But through the camera, nothing is even there. And as he tries to make sense of what this could be, another figure pops up and approaches his door. So could this really be an entity seen through a Tesla camera? Or is it just a glitch? They were about to get off their car.
You know, that's what's happening is, you know, and that's what I'm loving about today is this out of control technology that all of a sudden makes us realize
it's capturing stuff
that there's things around us beyond our comprehension.
Yeah.
And they're starting to bleed into that world of technology, which is what may be happening in terms of that moment that they call transformer.
Right.
Yeah, we'll get to those.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah,
Frankie,
I mean, that leads into
Sorry,
the whole
go on.
hallucination thing too. Sorry to cut you off, but you know, this idea of
No.
picking up things, and you know, they talk about how AI hallucinates certain things, and that's really an interesting concept as well, where it's just making stuff up out of the blue. And the problem with that is, if that's then people print that and put that on the internet as their own work, this wrong information framed in a totally wrong context or what have you, and then the models are then feeding off that same hallucination data. You can imagine these large models are kind of, it's like this, you've heard of dead internet theory, where everything on the internet is generated by an algorithm. And so it's like that becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. Does that make sense? Like it's like this redundancy,
absolutely.
which we all feel to a certain extent. I think that's part of the reason why we crave just hugging a tree. It's like we want something real. And I worry about that these models are they're just being fed their own information back again, and it's just like looping on itself. What's that going to end up looking like? So
we
garbage
live
in,
in
garbage out, right?
Yeah.
We live in a warehouse, and people walk in here and go, "Oh my God, it's a museum! It's a mausoleum, actually." But the truth of the fact is that we don't believe in a lost format. So I would go right back to that very early, GPT 0.5, the very beginning of it, that was doing all that abstraction, and say to you, isn't that allegorical with like when Brian Eno's first monophonic synth started to play up on its third voltage control oscillator? He had the option to either take it in to get repaired
or let it go,
or he loved what it was doing that was so unique that he just let it be. And that became his uniqueness. So I think in a sense, we should look forward to the mistakes, be highly aware of them, and utilize them in actually developing something. And that's the brilliance of using AI in a theatre piece, because theatre is a very upfront experience. It's unlike cinema. You sit in a small theater, you're not going to move for fear of being seen or disturbing the performance. It's sanctimonious. It's like church. But you are being
Not
social.
anymore.
You're in the midst of it. So would you stop?
It's true. I watch
everything
people in the
say?
cinema with their phones flicking, swiping. It's like, are you here to do your personal, business, or are you here to watch the movie? And now you're disturbing me as well.
We are getting so many comments on our page when we put up casts where they go, "Will you people stop talking over each other?" And we go, "We've been together 33 years." And you know what?
Love that.
People do talk over each
All the
other
time.
all the time.
Yeah.
The only time that they don't talk over each other is when they're shooting
When it's
a commercial
scripted. That's
or
right.
TV or film. And
That's
that's
right,
the
that's
only
right.
way. That's not real human conversation. What are we going for? So, Frankie, tell us about where you're headed, how people
Yes.
can get in touch with you, because
Yes.
hopefully someone's going to see this. There's going to be some major director.
Hopefully.
You know, we interviewed Alex Perez. He can give you a job. He needs you in that mystery theater, mystery cinema. But anyway, just tell us how people can get in touch and where you're headed with your incredible creative endeavors.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So I'm actually doing the next iteration of The Last Human. So sort of upgrading it and making it even better and more interactive and more immersive. Hopefully taking that to various festivals and kind of really grassroots festivals where people can really sort of, I can find the right audience for it. So hopefully we're doing, we've applied and we're going to be looking to do that. And then my research lab is like applying for grants and so forth and trying to bring in a really interesting team of people. My goal is to have a very diverse group of thinkers in different fields coming together to create various projects. And then I have a couple of documentaries, the one on Doug LaMarche I told you about, and a couple of other docos that I'm doing, a couple of films. It's different, so lots of different, creative projects. But the best, I really avoid social media, which is probably not a great thing, but I'm like Asper. I sort of try and keep my screen captured time to a minimum.
Sure.
And as you know, but anyway, I am on Instagram. So we are the Beyond.
How do they get in touch with you? We'll set up a link that may be stated.
I've got some stuff that Frankie's.
Yeah, you can put my website is the easiest way.
Right up in there.
Yeah, my website's the easiest.
All right, we'll set all those links up for the cast.
They're up.
Okay.
As we're speaking now,
yeah,
they're up.
Yeah.
In our
and we don't want any noise centre, Frankie. We just want people who've got finance behind them and can understand that if they get behind this revolutionary futurist, the good things will come their way, and it might be their only chance at illumination before they leave the planet Earth. Now, please excuse me here. This was Asper's call, not my call.
Hang on. Let me just explain, because this is episode number 69.
Yeah, and it was Valentine's Day recently, wasn't it?
It was on Wednesday.
Yeah, and you made a little reference to that, didn't you?
We don't do Valentine's Day. I have Valentine's Day every day with Jamie, so I don't need one day for him to be nice and loving. No, truly, he is lovely and loving and caring about me every single day of the year. I don't want just one token day.
That's
one
very
token
kind
day by paying, an exorbitant, a ridiculous amount of money for a rose.
Totally agree.
Can we get to where we're going?
No.
with episode
It's like
69?
again, capitalism coming in to exploit. What should be done
100%.
for, couples should be like every day. Anyway, so at number 69, I kept saying, episode 69, we're going to do something about blah, blah, blah. So here's the sex aspect of it, because it's number 69. So it's sex bots.
But there are arguments on the other side, and I would tend to lean more this way, which talk about the objectification of the human body and what that does to the way we relate to one another. So if a man, for example, is having all of his sexual experience with a machine, he begins to treat women as a literal object. How will they then develop friendships, work relationships, parenting relationships with people of the female gender? And it comes this on the back of a story yesterday in one of the papers about the link between heavy use of pornography and the early breakdown of marriages. If we learn to objectify human beings, we have very great trouble relating to them. And so there's much more to this whole sex toy, sex robotics story than simply the whiz-bang idea, bells and whistles, robots.
Men have always objectified women.
Absolutely,
and it
but
doesn't
but now it's like, but you were still, if you wanted to have a relationship with someone, right, you still had to go out there and try and have a conversation and be social and meet up. But if you're a little bit, socially inept, or you don't like, or you're really shy and you don't want to do that, if you can just go and go to Amazon and click and pay with your card, and they get it, they get
AI
it delivered it. Well, a bot comes and delivers it to your door, and then you just, and then that's it. You're getting your sexual satisfaction there. It's like you've got no incentive to try and be more social and get out of your shell, and it's just going to make it even worse. Do you know what I mean?
Don't forget, Asper, that you're going to be able to have a baby by taking a swab out of your cheek and putting that in a test tube and then having an artificial womb. You don't even need to have. You're pretty soon you're not going to need to have sex. You're not going to need to have a biological child.
I don't believe that's going to happen.
That's the transhumanist dream where you can control
and you know what,
and engineer the perfect.
Hopefully,
being,
I'll be way dead before.
We've put up the womb lab.
I know we put up the womb lab. We did a whole thing where they were making artificial wombs. There's a whole. It's out of control.
You know what? I think there's always been this thing, but the notion of the blow up doll, like an inflatable pool toy, and then all of a sudden now we've reached a level where it's automated. Yeah. And it has
it's
AI
got better
running.
Sucking action than anyway. Let's go.
But I want to
there, baby.
I want to think about the disenfranchised. The world is turning to OnlyFans too, which is really sad because OnlyFans because AI is removing so many jobs.
Absolutely.
So the only way. And here's poor old Anton.
Okay,
who's
careful.
Very unwell.
Well,
he's
just
moment.
Old. He's old.
He's very old.
Can't kill this guy with an axe. I'm telling you now.
He's been quiet for the whole program. 19 years of age.
Yeah,
but you know
gorgeous.
What? People have to empower themselves. So I'm going to go back to the working class and show you working class empowerment in the sex industry with the lowest rent version of that robot.
An escort service is about to open up in Kamloops. The escorts will turn up at your home or hotel room and even spend the night, but they're not human. They just look that way. Sinjin Alexander with the details.
Okay, this is Portia. She's 5'7",
and she's just been taken out of her cardboard box.
It's unbelievable how real looking it is.
The 5'7", 90-pound blonde will join Chanel.
Some beautiful cherry red lips.
And half a dozen other anatomically correct escorts in a legal, incorporated Kamloops agency.
She's very soft. She's very soft skin, and it's squishy, just like a person.
Of course, none are real. Instead, dolls made of silicone that anyone can hire for $350 a night. House of Dolls owner Kristen Dixon admits she was shy about buying her team and at first thought it was all a bit odd.
The more that I sit and look at them and kind of get used to the idea, the more intriguing, the more amazing it is.
The service is highly discreet. Dolls are delivered and picked up, then given a 2-hour cleaning.
It is like an antimicrobial soap that we use, and we scrub the whole doll down from head to toe.
She's also well aware it's controversial, that advocates say it literally treats women as objects.
That can be used and reused as however they please.
Well, I just think everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
But Dixon says the response has been overwhelmingly positive. She even has a man on her roster, 5'2" Zach.
No matter where you are, sex sells, and it's a human need.
She hopes to launch officially next week and figures her clients will be traveling business people or anyone who's curious.
Or it can fill up the HOV lane in your vehicle.
Sinjin Alexander, CTV News, Vancouver.
That's that real. You won't get a ticket.
Good on that. Wow. Good on you, Janelle. You've shut an entire business there for about $2,000.
She's the madam.
But could you imagine the shame file when you have to come home and micro clean that for 2 hours?
Scrub that vagina
the hell out of it.
Oh, that's kind of weird. I mean, it makes me think about, we've sort of been groomed for this objectification of women's been going on since the dawn of time, as you pointed out. And even like airbrushing and the way these models are created on magazines, they're not real people anymore once they've been morphed and changed and whatever. And so it means that out in the world, men have these expectations of even the illusions around marriage and the fantasies that the Hollywood produces around romantic rom-coms. Like it's all this, I mean, I know everything ends in a happy ending and there's always that thing. It's
social ending.
It is.
That's social engineering.
A happy
101.
ending at a massage parlor.
Yeah. And that's where the Crispin Glover law in the US, because of Back to the Future, he did not do that role. They CG'd him in. He refused to do that role because he said it was a piece of propaganda. It was the white picket fence. It was not the real world.
It's not the real world,
No,
exactly.
No, it's a construct.
So I think in a way, probably Janelle's got it all over Silicon Valley and the rest of it in a sense. Just buy those frigging dolls And for that part of the population that believes in objectification, throw them at them, give them a Barbie doll as a bonus for the next couple of hours, and then get it back home and scrub the hell out of it and move on. Anyway, crazy. Yeah.
It is crazy. It really
It's
is.
all wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We cannot thank you enough, Frankie. We will put those links up for you.
Okay, great.
And I hope
Excellent.
it hasn't been too much of a fractured experience with us.
No, it's been amazing.
We're coming off the back of a big day.
Yeah.
Big Greek funeral. So we're a bit erratic in our behavior today. I want to thank every single one of our
Greek
viewers and
funeral
listeners
today.
out there. We have some incredible people that support this channel and support
Awesome.
Untold Radio. And it's just a pleasure to be able to do this cast. It's a pleasure to not only call you, you know, an interviewee on this podcast, Frankie, but you are a very close friend and colleague, and we really appreciate who you are. We think you're an astounding artist, and you've always inspired and supported us, and we will always be behind you. So thank you for being part of Down South Anomalies
On the Untold Radio Network.
Spooky action in the Uncanny Valley.
Did you explain? See, you should have done it right up the front.
Oh,
but
yes,
nobody ever listened to me.
So what we're doing is we're bringing
Never listen.
two terms that have come together out of that sort of culture, but one of them out of quantum physics. And spooky action, I think, was coined in the 1950s, and it's a very complex notion, but it's about the fact that particles in separate distances can match themselves identically without any other relationship.
Right.
And these can be at massive distances. And that is what I'd say in a nutshell. If I sub-edit that and a physicist will come back and slap me, that is spooky action.
Right.
But the Uncanny Valley came to us through a Japanese tech who wrote a book about it in the mid-70s, stating that is that feeling when you're approaching artificial intelligence that's been anthropomorphized to act like a human being. Initially, you may accept that.
But then you look
somewhere in
closer.
that conversation,
Hang on.
you fall into the Uncanny Valley when the reflection hits you back that this is not entirely human. And believe me, I think in
Your
researching
disbelief is then unsuspended.
researching the anomalous worlds, because most of us are conditioned by our environment around us. So if you catch something that's operating outside of the field of what we know as consensus reality, initially your mind's going to anthropomorphize
Absolutely.
that. When you realize that it's not,
then
you're in the Uncanny
then you're
Valley.
in the Uncanny Valley.
So I think we're all dealing with that Uncanny Valley all the time now. It's the Elridge in the back room. It's that slight unease that we don't realize we've got because everything is not exactly what it should be.
Yeah, exactly. I think also I remember reading the translation because he was writing in Japanese or Korean. Or
That's right.
He was a roboticist, right? And I think it was also
Japanese.
like the less human something looks, the more we accept it. We think it's cute and nice, and we're engendered towards it. But increasingly, the more human they tried to make these robots look, the more unsettling it was for people. But I think the real translation of the word was eerie, not uncanny. But I still think both work really well. But that eerie feeling of just like something's off here. And I think it's kind of interesting because I think the closer we get to reality in general, maybe the more unsettled we feel. Maybe this applies.
I think that's a really valid.
Yeah.
I think that's an extremely valid point. I think the other thing that a lot of us don't realize is that our intuition can tell us more about that uncanny than we'd ever imagined.
And has AI got intuition?
Well, I think that transformer faction is intuition.
No. I think it robs us of our intuition. I think you're right, Aspa,
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was actually going to
we've
bring
just
that
sorted
point
out
up
a few
earlier.
major conundrums.
We did.
I'm right again.
Yeah. So is there anything you'd like to...
I was just going to, just to finish that thought about the intuition, because I was going to bring this up earlier. I know we're wrapping up, but it's that thing of like, when algorithms are serving us up everything. For example, the easy example is like GPS, right? So now we're so used to using these technologies to tell us where to go that we lose the instinct, we lose that intuition of sense of direction. That's just, we're robbed of that. And that you can see that across the board in so many different areas where, because we're being told what to think and we're being served up, like on Spotify, suddenly I'm told what to listen to next, because based on my previous history, they're going to serve me up the next song. So instead of me using my intuition and intuitively going around trying to find my, favorite, whatever, my next kind of thing to listen to, it's being given to me. Does that make sense? So I can see how things like that undermine our intuition.
Yep. So because we don't have a phone, we don't use,
that's a great point.
Maps, right? We don't use we don't just get in the car and then just punch in where we want to go and it tells us. I get on the computer, if it's somewhere I've never been before, I get on the computer, I bring up the map, I put in the address from where I am to where I want to go. And then I find, if I know the general area where I'm going, I leave it to the point of where I know. And then once I don't know where I'm going, I start writing the streets down. Pass, crossover, such and such a street. Then the next one is this road. At this street, turn right. And I write it all down, right? I write it down. And because I've written it down, I've looked at it, I've studied it. Then I get in the car. And if he's coming with me, he's the navigator because I'm driving.
Got to help us all.
and then we start,
Exactly.
I'm like, can't you see? I've written it down. Where do you want, but we get there. And because I've driven it, I've taken notice of streets and landmarks and stuff. The next time I go, I don't need any more directions. But I've used my brain the whole time. I've taken it all in. I've absorbed it. But if somebody does it like that, they don't pay no. They just go, okay, I've got to turn left here. Don't look at the street, in 100 meters or whatever. And then every time they have to go there for quite a while, they still have to use their navigation, app. Until I don't know when.
Well,
so they're not using their brain.
Doesn't make you want to absorb it.
No, you don't need to, because you say, well, I don't have to worry. I'll just listen to the instructions while I'm going and not take any notice to where I get there. So look, because we don't have mobile phones, there's a lot of things that we don't have that we don't access. Right. And we have to still, like, we're living back, in the 90s before the early 2000s, when it all started to happen.
Frankie's got
that's fine. That's great. But then there's other things that we miss out on because we don't have a mobile. But I weigh it up. And I think, you know what? I really don't need this. I don't need it. I never needed it before. It'd be great conveniently. It's like when he's left, I've given him a shopping list. Then I look down, I go, oh shit, I forgot to get that. And then I think, you know what? I'll make do. And I do. Yeah. I always make do because I can't ring him while he's down at the shop. So, hey, I forgot to send. And I'll just go to the fridge, or I'll change. I'll adapt because I don't have that convenience, and it's fine. It's always fine. I really don't need that phone. I will make do, but I just weigh it up and I think I don't need it yet. I don't need it yet. I'll hold down until
I actually thought you were going to say, because you don't have a phone, you more intuitively know if someone's going to call you.
All that sort of absolutely, absolutely. All that stuff happens all the time.
We're finding, Frankie, the more that we're actually becoming aware of that notion and the fact that we are like these fractured neo-Luddites, that coincidence moment and our intuition is becoming like on a telepathic level.
He's like out of control with it.
Yeah,
I will go someone's name and the phone will ring. It will be them.
Yep.
So I don't know, but I couldn't. There's no way I could tell you that I could how I'm deriving that point or predicting
but
it.
It's
just happening a lot more than it ever has. And look, Frankie, I mean, last week our episode was primarily around Charles Fort and the 50th year of 14 Times, the journal that's come out of Britain based on him. That's an astounding and unique publication. And Fort was highly suspicious, which led him to actually create these catalogues of oddities in a sense that sort of showed that anomalies exist in the scientific world and in the real world continuously back at the turn of the 20th century. But you know what? I still search for music endlessly, contemporary music, and I
Yes.
will get recommendations on sites that I'm on. And my instinct as an outsider artist from a teenager's age is I'm not going near those recommendations. I'm
Yeah.
searching for what I know to be outside. Don't you dare try and tell me. I have been that way since I was a young child.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
in a sense, some of us are slightly impervious to
Yes.
the endless, suggestions given to us
Right.
in this,
Right.
Yeah.
But you're hardwired for novelty because
algorithmic
you
world.
didn't, it's like, but like Asper was saying before, these young children that are not getting to have that
They're not. Yeah.
hardwired into their brain for that are going to be so much less able
Yeah.
to be less influenced
course.
by that. I think it's
Absolutely.
And social engineering is an amazing thing, because if that's happening to the children, what happens to us as adults through social engineering at school and community and society and the system we live in is we are hardwired to lose that ability to play, to search for novelty by the
So
time we
true.
get into our teenage years.
Yeah.
I mean, in our documentary, the British writer and cultural historian Jack Sargent says, well, I mean, look at Jamie and Asper. They're doing everything you did as a teenager, but you
They're
stopped.
still doing it.
They're
Yeah, we're
still
still doing
collecting
it.
films and records. Most people don't do that. They mature and move on. These two infantile,
I didn't say
No,
infantile.
but it's that sort of notion. But the truth is, the ability to play is the
I was
ability to
going to say
learn.
that.
That's how
Yeah.
children are educated. That's
Yeah.
how they understand the world. And that's the profound nature of our imaginations. The imagination of people in the 40s listening to radio as opposed to looking at television. Because their imagination could actually, I've always found radio far more excited, because there's not something there telling me this is the image that we've created to sit with these words. Your mind
Absolutely.
starts to create that image.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have waffled on too
Oh my
much
God.
today.
Yep.
And what was to be an hour show has
It's turned
become a
into 2
marathon.
hours. Yeah.
But
Almost.
look, wouldn't you love just rewriting War and Peace with Frankie?
Yeah,
On
absolutely.
an AI level.
Don't
I know,
Anyway,
it's-
we can't say thank you enough.
Yes, thank you guys. You know how much I adore both of you. You're both incredible
yes.
and so supportive, and I'm so grateful to be in your lives and sharing this time in history with you. And I hope
It's an amazing time.
it is an amazing time, and I'm so looking forward to the future creative experiences that we get to share. So thank you, and I just love what you guys are doing on your podcast. So
Thank you. And we
very
love
cool.
what you are doing.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate
Yeah.
it. We're very inspired and very grateful to have you in our life. Is there anything you'd like to say to the public before we leave this cast about people approaching AI, and anything that you think they might need to do, or what you feel like expressing?
I think just like we've touched on so many really good things, and it's really just about everything we've talked about. I think in summary is like to be very cognizant and to use it as a tool to really wake up. And so the more you can be conscious about how you're using these tools, that they're sort of flourishes on your imagination as opposed to replacing them, the better. And it just requires, because it's so easy to just get sucked into endless amounts of screen time, endless amounts of even just finding ways to use these tools can sometimes suck up so much time and energy instead of just getting it done and being creative. And don't stop reading books, don't stop human contact and getting together face to face with people like we have done, and sharing time. It's so important to stay embodied in your body and having that human experience and just use technology as a I know this it's so woo woo, and I'm sure everyone's saying the same thing, but I think it's so easy to get what's the word, like almost hypnotized by technology. And so it's just stay awake, like Russell Brand says, stay free, stay awake, and make sure that you're getting information from the source. Talk to the person.
Yeah
Get to the source of
because
stuff.
at the end of the day, we're human and we are social creatures. We really
We're very
are.
social. Yes.
And the problem with these technologies very isolated. You know what I mean? When you're stuck on a screen, when you're doing something, whatever it is, can be very, very, even if you're scrolling through people's Facebook or Instagram or stuff, it's still you are actually still isolated. Do you know what I mean? You're not actually connecting with the person or the people that you're looking at their stuff, their photo of, what they ate. I mean, why do I care about what people ate? I don't. You know what I mean? But you know, they felt it necessary to put it up so I can see what they had for dinner. That's the minutiae that we're dealing with. So, that is a very isolating thing. And you need to not to be so isolated. Catch up with that person. If you really care about what they're eating, go out with them and have a meal, or invite them around to your house and have a meal with them and really watch them eat what they're eating. I mean, they could have just taken a photo and put it up and said, "Oh, this is what I had," and it wouldn't be what they had.
Fake
you know
news.
what I mean? Yeah, fake news. There you go.
What was David Wilcox like as a teenager at school?
We haven't got much time left.
What was David? I know.
We're
I'm just throwing in a silly question. Were you comrades? Were you esoteric comrades at school?
We were, well, not at school as young, as adults, but he's a great guy. He's an amazing person. He's a wonderful, deep thinker, and he's really gone out and made an amazing path for himself in this world of, he's always been a very, what would I say, ahead of the curve, just really pushing the boundaries. And I love that. I love when people are willing to embrace totally different ideas and go deep. And, he's studied with a lot of great people, and I have a lot of respect for David.
All right. Well, look, it's been a pleasure. We'll put those links up, and thank you for being part of a very special, number 69 Spooky Action in the Uncanny Valley with the one and only Frankie Louise. You've been on Down South Anomalies. We'll catch you next week.
All right, kids. We'll be back next week with episode 70. Wow. There you go. All right. I'm excited. I'll see you very soon, I'm sure. Bye.
Okay. Bye.